Your spine tingles. A cold wave washes through your chest while speaking with someone who seems perfectly normal. Their smile appears genuine. Their words sound reasonable. Yet every fiber of your being whispers, something is wrong here. This isn't paranoia. It's ancient wisdom speaking through modern flesh. Deep beneath consciousness, your primal mind recognizes patterns that spell danger. Carl Jung spent decades mapping these invisible territories of human darkness. What he discovered will change how you see every relationship in your life. Because some people carry warnings that only your deepest instincts can decode. And when those alarms sound, your survival may depend on listening. First warning, the mirror denial. Picture this moment. You're sharing coffee with someone new. The conversation flows smoothly until suddenly they accuse you of thinking something you've never thought. They describe motivations you don't possess. They paint you as someone you don't recognize. But here's the terrifying part. They're completely convinced they're right. This is shadow projection in its rawest form. Inside every human psyche lives a basement of rejected parts. Traits we've deemed unacceptable get locked away in psychological exile. But exile doesn't equal extinction. These banished aspects gather strength in the darkness. They demand expression. And when someone can't face these parts within themselves, they see them everywhere else, especially in you. The person projecting their shadow isn't lying consciously. In their reality, you truly embody everything they refuse to acknowledge about themselves. Their conviction becomes their weapon. They can convince entire rooms that you are exactly what they claim. Ancient texts warned of this phenomenon centuries before Jung gave it a name. Buddhism speaks of the clouded mirror reflecting internal impurities as external threats. Christianity tells of seeing specks in others' eyes while missing the beam in your own. Every wisdom tradition recognized this fundamental human trap. Modern neuroscience now confirms what sages intuited. Our brains literally reshape reality to match our beliefs. But in cases of massive shadow projection, this natural filtering becomes complete distortion. The danger multiplies because the projector experiences no doubt, no inner questioning, no moment of maybe I'm wrong. They become prosecution, judge, and jury in a trial you never knew you were part of. When you encounter this phenomenon, you're witnessing someone at war with themselves. You become the battlefield for their internal conflict. The parts of themselves they cannot love are now yours to carry, and they will fight to keep it that way. Because admitting you're not what they claim would mean facing what they actually are. This creates a psychological prison where truth becomes impossible. Evidence bounces off like rain on steel. Your actual character, intentions, and actions become irrelevant. You exist now only as a canvas for their unconscious self-hatred. Recognition saves lives. When someone consistently attributes to you feeling thoughts or motivations that don't match your inner experience, when they remain immune to any evidence contradicting their narrative, when they speak about you with absolute certainty while you feel completely misunderstood, you're facing shadow projection. Trust your confusion. Trust that disconnect between their accusations and your inner knowing. Your bewilderment is not weakness. It's wisdom recognizing distortion. Second warning, when humans play God, there exists a species of human more dangerous than any obvious predator. They don't threaten with fists or harsh words. They destroy with certainty. Meet the person who has confused themselves with divinity. Their ego has merged with something vast and archetypal. They no longer see themselves as fallible humans stumbling through existence. They are channels of absolute truth, representatives of cosmic justice, vessels of divine will. This psychological inflation creates a particular kind of monster, one wrapped in the clothing of virtue. Unlike simple arrogance, which announces itself boldly, this condition whispers sweet poison. It masquerades as spiritual elevation, as moral superiority, as enlightened wisdom. Medieval mystics call this the most dangerous trap on the path to awakening, the light that blinds more completely than any darkness. Because how do you argue with someone who believes they speak for the universe itself? Watch their reaction when questioned. Listen to how they process disagreement. A healthy person hears criticism as information to consider. An inflated person hears it as blasphemy against cosmic order. They don't see your opposing viewpoint as legitimate human perspective. They see it as resistance to truth itself, opposition to the good they represent. This creates an impossible dynamic. You're not debating ideas with another human. You're apparently arguing with the universe through its chosen spokesperson. The inflated person radiates unshakable conviction. This certainty acts like a drug on uncertain minds. In a world of questions, they offer answers. In a sea of doubt, they provide solid ground. But that ground is quicksand disguised as bedrock. History's most destructive leaders often possess this quality, not conscious evil, but absolute conviction in their righteousness. They attracted followers precisely because they seemed to channel something greater than themselves. The danger multiplies because the inflated person genuinely believes in their own goodness. They cannot see their shadow because they've identified completely with light. This creates a blind spot so massive that their destructive actions become literally invisible to them. They can cause immense harm while maintaining perfect self-image. The greater the inflation, the more spectacular the eventual collapse. When reality finally penetrates the delusion, the psychic explosion can be devastating, not just for them, but for everyone in their orbit. Third warning, the perfect human illusion. Some people never surprise you. They always know exactly what to say. Every expression fits the moment. Every gesture serves its purpose. Every response lands perfectly. Yet something feels wrong, like watching a masterful actor who never breaks character. Even when alone, this is the danger of complete identification with the social mask. The persona has consumed the person. What you're experiencing isn't human interaction. It's performance art disguised as authenticity. These individuals have sacrificed their genuine self on the altar of social acceptance. They polish their surface until no rough edges remain. No contradictions, no spontaneous moments, no glimpses of the messy, beautiful chaos that makes us human. They become their own greatest masterpiece and their own worst enemy. Because perfection in human form isn't evolution, it's amputation. Your unconscious mind detects this immediately. Mirror neurons in your brain register the disconnect between their flawless exterior and the hollow interior. You feel it as unease without knowing why, as distrust without clear reason, as the sensation of speaking to a beautifully crafted robot. The real terror lies in what this extreme adaptation conceals. When someone pours all their psychic energy into maintaining an immaculate facade, the rejected parts don't disappear. They ferment in the darkness, building pressure, gathering force. The more rigid the mask, the more violent the eventual eruption. Those who seem most controlled often possess the most chaotic shadows. When that dam finally breaks, the flood can be catastrophic. This explains why apparently perfect people sometimes commit shocking acts. The helpful neighbor who turns out to be dangerous. The respected leader who secretly destroys lives. The admired figure who suddenly reveals themselves as someone else entirely. Complete identification with the persona is psychological betrayal of the deepest kind. A person selling their soul for social approval. And like all profound betrayals, it eventually demands payment. Fourth warning, when something else moves in, you're talking to Sarah. But suddenly, Sarah isn't home anymore. The same body sits before you. The same voice speaks. But the energy has shifted completely. Something ancient and primal has taken residence behind her eyes. You're no longer conversing with an individual human being. You're facing an archetypal force wearing human flesh. This is possession without demons. Takeover without the supernatural. Just primordial patterns of the collective unconscious, assuming control of individual consciousness. The person becomes a hollow vessel for energies far beyond their capacity to integrate. They might embody the eternal victim, forever wronged by the world. The righteous warrior, battling invisible enemies. The wounded healer, saving everyone but themselves. The sacred martyr, suffering for humanity's sins. Which archetype matters less than the complete surrender to it? Watch their eyes during these moments. Notice the strange luminosity, the sense that you're looking at someone from a great distance, as if the individual personality has retreated deep inside, leaving only the archetypal pattern in control. Shamanic cultures understood this phenomenon intimately. They knew the difference between controlled channeling and dangerous possession, between voluntary partnership with transpersonal forces and involuntary takeover. The possessed person experiences extraordinary certainty. All the ambiguity of normal human consciousness vanishes, replaced by absolute knowing, unshakable purpose, divine mission. This certainty becomes their greatest weapon and your greatest danger, because you're no longer dealing with human psychology. You're confronting forces that have shaped civilizations and toppled empires. The person in possession cannot hear you. cannot see you clearly, cannot access the flexible, questioning part of consciousness that makes dialogue possible. They become a mouthpiece for something that operates by entirely different rules. And when the possession ends, they often remember little, or rationalize everything as perfectly justified. The scariest part? These archetypal patterns contain extreme polarities. The same force that creates saints also creates fanatics. The energy that births healers also births destroyers. When someone becomes completely identified with an archetype, they will inevitably manifest its darkest aspects, often while remaining convinced of their pure intentions. Fifth warning, the invisible maze. Some people are trapped in psychological mazes with no exit. They walk the same corridors of pain over and over. Different faces, same story. Different locations, identical endings. Different partners, matching wounds. They seem genuinely shocked each time the pattern repeats, as if cruel fate keeps dealing them the same terrible hand. But fate isn't the dealer. They are, unconsciously, automatically, compulsively. This is the repetition compulsion, perhaps the most tragic of all psychological patterns. The person caught in this loop doesn't choose their pain. They're driven by forces operating completely below conscious awareness. Early experiences, especially traumatic ones, create neural highways in the brain. These pathways become the routes of least resistance for all future experiences. The unconscious mind develops templates for relationship, conflict, and resolution, then spends a lifetime seeking situations that match these internal models. Even when the models produce suffering, the danger for others lies in getting recruited as actors in someone else's unfinished drama. Without realizing it, you find yourself playing a role in a story that began decades before you met this person. You might be cast as the abandoner, the betrayer, the savior, or the persecutor. The specific role doesn't matter. What matters is that you're not relating to them in the present moment. You're relating to ghosts from their past, fighting wars that ended before you were born, healing wounds you didn't create. The most disturbing aspect is how the compulsion creates its own evidence. The person unconsciously orchestrates situations that confirm their deepest fears. They expect betrayal, so they test loyalty in ways that eventually push people away. They anticipate abandonment, so they create scenarios that make leaving seem inevitable. They predict rejection, so they behave in ways that invite it. Then they point to the results as proof that the world is exactly as cruel as they believed. This creates a closed system where growth becomes impossible, where new experiences get filtered through old wounds, where the future becomes a prison built from the past, the path beyond danger. But there is another way, a road that leads beyond these psychological traps. Jung called it shadow integration, the conscious recognition and acceptance of our own capacity for all the darkness we see in others. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. When someone has genuinely begun this inner work, they radiate a different quality entirely. They can admit their own problematic impulses without shame or self-indulgence. They see the world in shades of gray instead of absolute black and white. They approach others with curiosity instead of certainty. They hold space for contradiction and complexity. Most importantly, they've developed the ability to catch their own patterns before acting them out unconsciously. This creates psychological flexibility instead of rigid reactivity, authentic authority instead of defensive authoritarianism, genuine humility instead of false modesty, real compassion instead of performed virtue. The integrated person doesn't need to project their shadow because they've made friends with it. They don't need to inflate their ego because they've found their true size. They don't need perfect masks because they've accepted their imperfections. They're not possessed by archetypes because they've learned to dance with them consciously. They're not trapped in repetition because they've made the unconscious conscious. This is the antithesis of psychological danger. The person who has walked through their own darkness and emerged not perfect, but aware, not pure, but integrated, not invulnerable, but authentic. When you meet such a person, your nervous system relaxes. Your guard comes down naturally, because you're finally in the presence of someone who poses no hidden threat, someone who has done the work of becoming genuinely human. The question that matters now, which kind of person are you becoming, and which kind do you allow into your life? Your answer may determine not just your happiness, but your very survival in a world with the most dangerous predators with the faces of ordinary people. Trust your instincts. They're trying to save your life.